Welcome to the Patchwork Podcast. My name is Brandon Robertson. Patchwork is a show that brings together various voices and perspectives on the topics of spirituality, social justice, and culture to help you expand your mind and tap into a richer, fuller life. To start, let me introduce myself. I'm Brandon, and for as long as I can remember, I've had a passion for bringing together diverse people and perspectives. My journey began as a teenager who joined a conservative Baptist church and at the same time began wrestling with my own queer sexuality. The tension of these two important aspects of my identity, my faith and my sexuality, led me down a path of curiosity and questioning in just about every aspect of my life. Today, I'm an author, a pastor, and a consultant to faith communities and organizations around the world about how we can build bridges and understand those who experience the world differently than we do. And this podcast is an extension of that passion and that work. In every episode, we'll dive deep into a new topic with an expert in that field and see if we can get a better understanding. You might agree with what's said. You might disagree. Whatever the case, I invite you to lean in and listen deeply, because I assure you that you'll find something worth grabbing onto in every conversation that will enrich your journey. As with all things done in public, your support means the world to me. So if you find today's content compelling, please tweet, post, like, share on all the social media platforms using the hashtag Patchwork. And your feedback really does make every episode better. So if you have time, please consider heading over to iTunes and leaving a review. Again, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's jump into today's conversation. Hey there, and welcome to the Patchwork Podcast. It's Brandon here. We are in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election, and I don't know about you, but to me, that's pretty hard to believe. It's hard to believe that we are yet again entering into another season of primaries and candidates running and declaring their intention and making the case for why they would be the best leader of our country. It seems like we were just there. It's hard to believe Donald Trump's been leading our country for as long as he has, and that we're about to come across a finish line, another election, have the opportunity to put a new leader in power. As we're entering into this season, as kind of the heartbeat of Patchwork Podcast, we're about leaning into difficult situations and conversations. And again, because this is the most divided era in American history since perhaps the Civil War, it's an interesting time for us to be listening to candidates both on the right and the left talk about why they are the right leader for our country in this moment. We also know that leaders of the United States, the President of the United States, isn't just the leader of our country, but is the leader of the free world, as it's often said. They hold a leadership role that impacts virtually every nation, economy, people group on this planet. And so as we're watching and listening to these contenders for the presidency, we're listening to people make the case of their vision to heal and renew and restore our country, but also to heal and renew and restore our world. And there's something profoundly spiritual about these conversations as well as social. And so in the Patchwork Podcast over the next 6 months, it's going to be my goal, it's my hope, to be able to sit down and interview a number of potential presidential candidates. I've had a career in political organizing. I've been an advisor. I currently still serve as an advisor to the Democratic National Convention. I'm deeply involved in the political process of our country. I'm deeply compelled by it. I love to be a part of it. And as a faith leader and a person of faith, I think there is a direct role that I'm called to play. I think our politics need to be rooted in something deeper than just philosophical musings. I think our politics should be rooted in a deep faith tradition. And so I'm going to be talking and interviewing a number of candidates for president, primarily Democratic, because I highly doubt our current president will want to sit down and talk to me, but We are also seeing there are candidates in the Republican Party running against Donald Trump, one announced just yesterday, I saw. With all of that said, today I want to bring you a conversation with a candidate for the presidency of the United States that I really admire, who is somebody I look up to, have learned a lot from over the years, and am honored to call a friend. And that's Marianne Williamson. Marianne is best known for being a spirituality author. She wrote a book called A Return to Love that became an international bestseller and really helped revolutionize spirituality in this modern era. Marianne's known as an advisor to Oprah Winfrey and has influenced spiritual teachers, leaders, and people around the world for decades. And now Marianne has launched her campaign to be the President of the United States. Just this past Sunday, she was featured on a CNN town hall with Dana Bash, where she was able to articulate her vision and why she feels she has something to offer our country that it so desperately needs in this era. And so it was an honor for me to grab some time with Marianne and ask her some questions, not only about religion and spirituality, but about why she feels like she could be the best candidate for the president and what she could offer our country. And so I'm really excited to bring that conversation to you. But before we jump in, I also want to let you know that this past week we launched a Patreon page. Patreon is a service that helps creatives and creators like me fund our work. And as you can imagine, this Patchwork Podcast, it takes finances, it takes effort, it takes time to bring you these conversations. And so I would encourage you, if you are enjoying this podcast so far, and if you want to be a part of this ongoing work of these conversations at the intersection of spirituality and social renewal and culture, I want to invite you to go down to the show notes today and click on the Patreon link and subscribe. It can be as little as $5 a month. It can be as much as however much you want to give a month. We're trying to get about $2,000 a month, which is what it will cost to produce this podcast at the level that I'm hoping to do so. So if you're blessed by Patchwork, if you want to see this work go forward and these conversations continue, I want to encourage you to head over to patreon.com, search for Brandon Robertson or Patchwork, or just go down to the show notes and click the link and offer your financial support. I'm really grateful. There are a number of perks and benefits if you're interested. So thank you ahead of time for that. And without further ado, I'm really excited to bring you this conversation again with someone running for the Democratic nomination for the President of the United States. Here's my conversation with Marianne Williamson. First of all, thanks for joining me. And you're running for the most influential office in the world, and that's this most powerful position in the world is a huge step for anyone to step into. So I just wonder, right off the bat, how are you thinking about, if you were to be able to step into the office of the president, how are you internally going to handle this power and the weight of responsibility?
I don't think that anyone, except possibly someone who has been vice president, has a basis from which they can say, oh, that's no big deal. And even for the vice president, it's a big deal. But what I challenge is the idea that if someone's been a congressman or a senator or a governor, that is that much closer. Because even though the functionality is very similar in terms of governmental functioning, the real issue is the depth, the gravity, the significance of the role. And I don't think that my background and my experience prepares me to have any less gravity, sobriety, and sense of significance. In fact, I think someone who has worked spiritually with people in terms of personal transformation, if anything, might have a greater sense of depth and gravity and sobriety.
Totally.
If you think about God's love every day and how that applies to living a righteous life, that gives you the depth, hopefully the wisdom and the gravity that I believe is most necessary.
Totally. I think that's a beautiful answer, and I think that makes so much sense. And yet, I know you know that you're going to be facing a lot of opposition from those who, especially on our democratic side of things, that are looking and saying, what does somebody who's spent their life talking about spirituality and religion and been in this weird world of spirituality and religion have to offer to the United States in this moment? What would you say the role of your own spirituality plays as you're looking towards becoming president of the United States?
A nation is a group of people. That's what a country is. 360 or odd million people. And in a very real way, if you know or have some kind of a clue what changes one life, you're someone who has a clue as to what changes the world. Because life doesn't change just because you tweak things on the outside. Life transforms. We go from trauma to transformation through internal change, through taking a fearless moral inventory, through confessing our sins, some might say, or addressing our character defects, whether you look at those things through a religious lens or a secular lens. It's the idea that you have to look at yourself. You have to ask, where am I who I say I am? Where am I actually behaviorally standing on the values that I purport to care about? Where do I not have a debt yet to be paid? Where am I and where am I not yet acknowledging what's most important in my life and in my relationships? That is the work we need to do as a nation. So to me, that is political vision. We need political vision as much as we need a political mechanic. And Franklin Roosevelt said the primary job of the presidency is moral leadership. So when you say my spirituality, first of all, I'm not claiming that my spirituality is any deeper or more significant than that of any other candidate. But my skill set, my professional skill set, is that I facilitate that questioning and I facilitate that transformation that emerges from spiritual understanding. That, I believe, is what this country most needs, and therefore I believe that I'm the candidate with the skill set that most matches the needs of this time. Totally.
Yeah, it definitely seems to me, and I'm looking as a political activist, but also as a faith leader, that just as you're saying, we're in this unique moment of American history. Some might say one of the most divided moments in our country's history. And it seems that we need more than just political or policy answers. Those are really important, but it seems like there's something bigger going on here. And I'm reminded of Jesus' own teaching. He said, a house divided cannot stand. And can you talk to me a little bit about our country and its polarization right now, why you think we got to this moment of intense polarization, and how you could help us come out of it?
Rugged individualism became, in too many ways, rugged narcissism. Our foundational principle is e pluribus unum, out of many one. The diversity is important. We're different cultures, different ethnicities, sexes, sexuality, religions, no religion, staid, traditionalists, wild hipsters, liberal, conservative. That's beautiful. That mix is, our greatness lies there. But that is simultaneously and equally important to the concept of our unity. And our unity comes from our fealty, our commitment, our devotion to a set of principles. All men are created equal. God gave all men inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. And ours is to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Those are collective principles. Those are principles which keep all of us free. And when we are willing, for what we see as our own personal purposes to compromise those principles in how we view any group, then we're threatening our own freedom and protection. We have forgotten not just our common needs, we have forgotten our common responsibilities. No one has a monopoly on values, no one has a monopoly on truth. But we all share a very precious gift, a very precious blessing that we've been given. Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. I believe that. There are high-minded conservative values, there are high-minded liberal values. But what should not be in question is democratic values. Democratic, with a small d. What should not be in question are these basic principles of equality, these basic principles of equal opportunity, these basic principles of the role of government to secure our rights. And that ours is to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Those principles, John Adams said he wished, he hoped, that on July 4th of every year, we would revisit our first principles. Instead, they're inscribed on marble walls, they're written in parchment behind glass somewhere. Maybe when you're in the junior high school, you visit Washington, you see them.
Yeah.
But if every generation doesn't truly imbibe them, truly take them into our hearts and rededicate ourselves to them, then they lose moral force. And that is what has happened. So everybody's out for themselves. And we have an economic system, and unfortunately a political system, which over the last 40 years has supported that economic system in the promulgation of the notion that market forces should be the organizing principle of our society. Now, if you make market forces, particularly market forces untethered to any ethical consideration, tethered only to a sense of fiduciary responsibility to stockholders, but without any sense of ethical or moral responsibility to other stakeholders, workers, environment, community, then that turns the market into a false god. Love is supposed to be our bottom line. Now, this, by the way, is not good for business. That's just a canard. This hasn't created some vibrant economy except for a very, very small group of people. It's decimated our middle class. If you put love first, that's not sacrifice. If you put love first, that's how to generate abundance. Because when you put love first, you generate people's ability to make their dreams come true. You uncap people's dreams. Right now, we suppress people's dreams. We suppress people's creativity by not giving them the means to actualize their dreams. That's what happens when you withhold education. That's what happens when you withhold the opportunity to make a decent living. That's what happens when people are so burdened by college loans or with the thought of how they're even going to go to college. Everybody's just in this suppressed state. Yeah. When in fact, God gave each of us unlimited potential. All of us have unborn dreams within us. And it should be the function of our government to seek to create a society in which as many people as possible are unshackled, so that the God-given potential within them can be brought to bear upon the world. That's how you have a healthy economy. And that's how you have a peaceful world.
I love it. You know, it strikes me though, so one of the things that I find so compelling about you, and I think that makes you so unique, is that for the past, I would say maybe 40 years, Democrats have really, and liberals in general, have really forfeited spirituality and religion to the right. We've given that over to them, and we've believed this lie that only conservative backwater people care about religion, but the rest of our country, the majority of the country, is becoming secular and doesn't really care about this stuff. But as you're talking about love being our core principle, that's both a realistic principle, but it is also a spiritual and or religious principle. Why do you think liberals have such a hard time rooting ourselves in religion or spirituality, or backing up our political positions with something a little bit deeper, like a spiritual grounding?
Well, I don't think it was that Democrats and liberals thought that only a bunch of backwater conservative people cared. I don't think that at all. As many liberals care about religion and spirituality as conservatives do.
Right.
Well, I don't think that's what happened. But what happened was that people withdrew the conversation from the public sphere and began to see it as simply an issue of private morality.
Hmm.
And you're right in that some people acted as though they were like too cool to bring up the M word. Now, traditionally, before that, the right, the political right, tended to focus more on issues of private morality, but the political left had tended to focus on issues of public morality, as they should. War and peace should be a moral issue. Spending so much more money on preparing for war, spending over $1,000 on preparing for war for every dollar you spend on creating peace, to me, that's a moral issue. Neglecting millions of children to chronic trauma, unable to escape circumstances which will make their high school graduation improbable and incarceration probable, that to me is a moral issue. Squeezing from people the kinds of benefits and promotional opportunities and abilities to retire with dignity that enable people to live, that to me is a moral issue.
Yeah.
But you're right, Democrats stopped contextualizing it within a spiritual or moral context, but they didn't stop fighting for those things. So whereas the political right was often not walking their talk, the political left was not talking their walk. And ultimately, I think a lot of people, even if you're proposing policies that are aligned with their values, if you're not naming or acknowledging their values, that matters.
Right.
That matters.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I got to serve in the last presidential election as a faith advisor to the DNC, and this was the constant problem that we faced, was that our candidates had spiritual values, they had faiths of their own, but they were too afraid, and their campaign staff was too afraid to name that publicly, because there was this mystified state that liberals didn't care about religion, and if you started bringing up religion, you'd sound like a conservative.
I don't think, I still don't think it's that they thought people didn't care, but it's been this erroneous, it's been odd. It's been an erroneous perception of what the separation of church and state is.
Right.
And it's also been this overly corporatized, I don't know. I think what matters most, Brandon, is it didn't work. It caused damage rather than an increased support to progressivism in general, and it's time to stop it.
Totally. And so this is, if you're to step into the office of the president, you're going to be doing it after Donald Trump, who is, in so many ways, he has reshaped what presidency looks like, for worse mostly, I think. What would you do if you're stepping into the Oval Office, you have your first 100 days, and you have to clean up the country after 4 years of Donald Trump? What would be the first things you're going to look to address?
First of all, let's not kid ourselves. The problem didn't just start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is, in my mind, an opportunistic infection that could not have taken hold had there not been a weakened societal immune system. So there are things to clean up that go way back much further than Donald Trump.
That's good.
We need to recognize that. First thing I would do probably is call European leaders and say, we're back. I would definitely re-enter the Paris Climate Accords. I would call Jacinda Ardern, who's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who has said that her goal is to make New Zealand the best place for a child to live. I would tell her, girlfriend, you are so on. This competition starts right now, right here. And I would ask her ways that we might be able to work together and that I might learn from her in terms of improving the conditions of American children. I would reach out to Palestinian and Israeli leaders. It's been a while since the United States has truly been an honest broker. It would be a great emphasis of mine for an appropriate support of the legitimate security concerns of Israel to be balanced and robustly so with concern for the human rights and dignity and economic hopes of the Palestinian people. I would appoint a world-class environmentalist to the Environmental Protection Agency No more chemical company lobbyists, oil company lobbyists, and oil company lobbyists would no longer be head of the Interior Department. I would work to make sure that the EPA and all the incredible environmental scientists and sustainability experts that we would be attracting into that agency would know that the president has your back. The president realizes we have 12 years to turn this thing around. We will do everything that we can. We will do massive greening of the economy. We will do massive infrastructure repair on that green level. So that would be well established. I would appoint a Secretary of State who is a world-class humanitarian and diplomat, not willing in any way to sacrifice our moral values for the sake of strategic partnerships that have little to do with anything more than money. I would appoint an attorney general who would be very aware not only of the racial disparity in criminal sentencing, but all other deep levels of prejudice, racism, homophobia, and every other incident or trend of injustice towards any group of Americans. We would have an attorney general very, very aware of and proactive in relation to civil liberties for all Americans. And I don't know, Brandon, that would be my first week.
You got my inner preacher coming out. I just wanted to say amen to all of that.
Thank you. Good stuff. Thank you. Take it to the voting booth, please.
Yes, absolutely. And so the last question that I just want to ask is one, so I tweeted out yesterday that I was going to be interviewing you, and I'm going to be interviewing a couple other candidates as well. And one question that kept coming up is this, and it's not to end it on a pessimistic note, but it's to say this. If you weren't to get the Democratic nomination for president, what role would you see yourself playing in the next administration, the next 4 years, to help continue to shape our country in the direction that it needs to go if you don't occupy the role as president?
I have a 35-year career in which my desire, intention, and work to better the world around me as much as I can is well established. This is a continuation of what has always been for me professionally. And whatever occurs after this election, whether I'm elected president or not, will be a further continuation of that work.
Amen. And so you're on CNN's Town Hall Debate this April 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern time?
Sunday night, that's 2 days from now.
Awesome.
7 p.m. Eastern.
And where can people find out more about you and your campaign?
Thank you, Brendan, at Marianne2020.com.
Awesome. Well, Marianne, I'm cheering you on. I'm really excited for what you're bringing to this country and conversation. So
thank you so much.
I hope that you found today's conversation inspiring and challenging. It's through listening in and learning from others who see the world differently than us, which, by the way, means everyone, because no two people have the same vantage point. That's how we grow and expand. If you did enjoy today's podcast, please share it with your friends on social media and help to spread the word. And when you do, use the hashtag Patchwork. I really appreciate it. In the words of Evan Boland's beautiful poem called Patchwork, only when it's laid right across the floor, sphere on square and seam on seam, in a good light, a night sky spread, will it start to hit me. These are not bits, they are pieces, and the pieces fit. Thank you again for spending some time with us today. Until next time, peace be with you.